Hello and welcome to the Grassroots Coachcast episode 4. I'm one of your hosts, Dave.
And I'm Ben. How you doing?
Today we're going to be talking about coaching your own children, the challenges and the rewards that go with it. And in our retro review, we'll be taking a look back at the crazy gang of Wimbledon FC. Okay, so Ben, how's it been going?
Yeah, it's been a challenging week with the team. So as we said last week, we had a good win 5-2. So we hadn't trained for a couple of weeks because I was ill. So I was very enthusiastic about my first training session after the first day of the course. So I had my plan, do review in my head. So probably for the first time, I did a really structured plan. I always have a plan, but I wrote this one out and I made it quite graphical. Obviously I sent it to you and you saw it. Mm-hmm. So I arrived full of enthusiasm, and it's fair to say it was quite a challenging session. There was a fair bit of messing around from my lad and the assistant manager's lad as well, strangely enough. So that was a bit frustrating. I spent quite a lot of time. In the end, I had to pull them to one side, the pair of them, and have a bit of a chat because they were just messing around constantly, and it was driving me mad. And there was a little bit. I got a sense of quite a lack of focus this week, which is odd because they're not normally like that. Obviously, they get a bit distracted between routines, and when you're talking to them sometimes. But yeah, there was quite a lot of messing around and a bit of a lack of focus, which kind of did my head in a bit. I don't know if that was because we hadn't trained for a couple of weeks or I'd not been at the game. So I introduced a couple of warm-up activities, which were pretty straightforward. They weren't very complicated. And the first one, which you saw, was just 3 little cones in the middle and 5 players in the little exercise. And they just had to pass backwards and forwards through the cones and run round to the other side when they'd done it. Mm-hmm. So it was very short, little soft passes, and of course I had two of these going at once, and all I could see was the ball flying about 20 meters away, and I'm like going, why are you chasing footballs across the whole pitch? And I ended up showing them sort of 2 or 3 times. I was like, little dink it off, small pass, run around, and they kept doing it. They just kept booting the ball so hard. It was crazy. In the end, they got it, and it worked quite well. But initially, they just didn't get. It was just, watching the weight of your pass, which is sort of part of the point of doing it, really. Mm-hmm. And then the second one, so you had 4 cones, player each side, basically passing to it. One player's passing to the other, bring it in with your one foot, and play it back with your other foot. So it's like control pass using both feet. Yeah. And I showed them probably 3 times with one of the lads. And literally, they all just stood around going, I don't get it. What have I got to do? And partly I was doing a plan do review, probably there was a bit of confusion the way I laid the cones out, possibly. Mm-hmm. So they weren't probably laid out as well as I could have done. So that probably didn't help. But yeah, they just genuinely didn't get it, which was surprising because they're normally quite good at, you show them a routine, they tend to pick it up. But things did perk up after that, and we did some kind of one-on-one defending stuff and a bit of possession stuff, but just generally a bit ragged. And at the end, I said to them all, "How do you think we trained today?" And one of them just said, "Rubbish." And I thought, well, there you go. And I said, "Well, why was that?" And he said, "Oh, we weren't listening properly." And I said, "Well, good. Well, let's go away and think about that. And next week we'll come back and hopefully we'll be a bit more focused. But there'll be a bit of a chat about general behaviour before we start, I think." So. Mm. But I gather you had a bit of a time of it today as well, by the sound of it. What happened?
Yeah, I think it could be that, just a coincidence, or it could be, the kids trying to just chop us down to size. You think you're going off on this course, you think you're something special now. Yeah, I'm going to show you who's the boss, really. So I think we had a challenging one as well. What I will say is that the warm-up routines that I'd picked up on the course,
Yeah.
I did those, and those went down really well. So I think I talked to that last episode where I talked about the old, you have a couple of players, and they'll count, one, and then the other player counts two, and then three, and then you introduce, when you say one, right, you do some kind of warm-up activity. So you do high knees or something. Yeah. When I shout two, you do the old bum flicks, heel to bum kind of thing. And then three, you jump up as high as you can and do a header. Yeah. So, and we built that up, and it was a lot slower, and it took us a little while to get there, quicker than a bunch of like 30 and 40-year-old blokes. Obviously, it took a little bit of head scratching, but when they got it, they really got into it and really enjoyed it, Yeah. And also we played the game of snatch. So, if you do the old heads, shoulders, knees and toes, and when you shout toes, try and drag the ball back, so again, you've got two of them paired up, trying to grab the ball. And so it started off, the whole warm-up was quite fun, and I think they were really enjoying it. And then we tried to, so for the last about, I guess, 5 or 6 weeks, I think I mentioned before, we've been focusing on the ball control, the ball mastery. So not so much on just possession and passing. And so today was the time to try and focus on that. And I guess it felt just a little bit like snakes and ladders, so we'd been climbing the ladders, and then we possibly hit a little bit of a snake where, everything seemed a little bit of a struggle, and I think we started off, a couple of teams, so 4 on each side of the pitch, so you got half a 5-a-side pitch essentially to work within, and then 1 defender, so 4 on 1. And I think we were really struggling to keep possession at that ratio in the first half, at least, of the training session. So it's just one of those where, again, I think we thought we were maybe a bit further ahead than we were, and it'll just require. So for the next few weeks, we'll focus more and more on just possession, and we'll get better and better at it. So, it's like anything, isn't it? You just have to understand where your baseline is. But actually, one of the things that I cast my mind back to, I think it was the chap on the course, or maybe I picked it up from somewhere else, that, learning isn't a linear thing. It's quite messy. Yeah. So, if you expect to draw a straight line, if you're at this baseline and then you put X hours of practice in, then you draw a straight line, and that's how good you are at the end of it. It's not like that. It's kind of messy and all over the place. And so, this morning a little bit messy, but we'll keep working on in possession drills for the next few weeks, and I'll expect to see that week on week improvement. Yeah,
I got a bit off a little bit after it, but I thought, it's all learning. Not every practice is going to work. Not everyone's going to be smooth. So, we'll try again next week. And I said to them, a lot of this stuff that you found a bit difficult. I mean, I said at the end of it, did you enjoy those routines? And they said, yeah. So that was positive. I think by the end of it, they had got the hang of it. So if I do them again, which I will, they should pick them up reasonably quickly, and we won't waste as much time. Mm-hmm. That was it's probably the thing, because you only got the hour. You're kind of conscious of. I mean, I like to do a sort of 20, 25-minute game at the end, and we only did 15 minutes because we took so long doing the routines that it but I wanted them to kind of get them, which they did by the end of it. But I thought if that eats into, obviously, and there was the messing around element, that into time a bit. But generally, it wasn't. On reflection, it probably wasn't as bad as I initially thought it was. But
yeah, I guess the. Oh, sorry, you cut out there. Say that again.
Yeah, I didn't really say anything else. I was just saying that's just the
All right.
sort of perfectionist in me wanting to have every session to be good and have the parents watching thinking, oh, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, up in the gallery.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they all sit in our stand, so I can see them all sat in the. We've got one stand, and they're all sat at the back there, sort of looking down and thinking, "Oh God." But the feedback's always all right for them. So
I guess that's the tricky thing, isn't it? With the more complex drills, the more complex you make a drill,
yeah,
it's going to take longer. It's going to eat into the rest of your time, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, and I think what was interesting as well. I just won't go into it too much, but obviously Elijah's doing this Crystal Palace Academy training on a Friday, and I went down last night, and all they did last night was play a match. That was it, but he had them in zones, and the whole session was geared to zonal positioning. So they only played a match for the whole hour and a bit, but obviously
it's quite a long time for 10-year-olds, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean he was obviously stopping the game quite a lot, and he was pointing out where they should be positioned, and so it wasn't like a mad frantic whole solid hour. He called them round every now and then, and they'd have a chat and he'd point little things out. But I got quite a lot from that, and a part of me thought it's probably not a bad way of having a session. You just almost do one thing, but you keep coaching them on that one thing, which I found quite interesting. So I mean, it was 7-a-side. I don't have that many players, so it might be easier when you've got more players. But yeah, it made me think I might do a session just around that. You know, you're positioning on the pitch, and even if you don't do anything else, you just keep working. You divide the pitch into zones, or it just gave me a few ideas. And you know, just watching I said to you last night, touch and the awareness of those players, you can see. Wow, it was really impressive, and you can sort of see the gap to my team and where. You know, you'd like them to get to ultimately, but yeah, I was very impressed. So yeah, it was good.
I suppose the other interesting thing with that is that they are essentially just playing a match for the whole training session. You know, it's a coach-controlled thing, but it's striking that balance between the unopposed drills type practice and then the competitive match situation, and that's something I wrestle with as well. And
I think when you're at that stage, it's almost like you don't need to do sessions on how to pass the ball, you know, because they can do it, and their touch is so good. It's more then about the fine tuning, more tactical elements of, you know, when should you press, when should you not press, when should you hold your position, when should you go into the attacking third, when you should stay in midfield. It was brilliant to watch, and I took quite a lot from it. So it's that whole thing of watching other sessions, and you always pick stuff up. So it's good going there every week because you do get a lot from it. So yeah, all good.
We'll keep bringing back the notes.
Yeah. You're always nicking ideas, aren't you, from other people?
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so let's just talk about the iTunes plugs then. So if you like what you hear, please go ahead and click that subscribe button on iTunes or Stitcher. And we really appreciate those 5-star reviews or a Go Lazzo, which will help other people find the podcast in their searches. You can get in touch with us at grassrootscoachcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. And you can also get us on Twitter at grootscoachcast. So if you'd like to give us a follow and drop us any questions or comments, that'd be great. So, anything else, any other news, Ben, that we want to talk about? We'll just skip over the rugby.
Yeah, let's not mention the rugby. Go again. No,
okay. So let's move on to our next section, our main section, which is coaching your own. So Ben, I guess we've got an interesting kind of vantage point with this subject, haven't we? Because we're both involved in coaching our own kids, and we've also, some of our other kids are in football teams that we don't coach.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting where this conversation goes. So let's start off with you. And what would you say some of the challenging aspects of managing your own kids or coaching your own kids initially? And we can talk about the good stuff as well.
Well, I think firstly, it's nice to have your child in your team. I think personally, I kind of quite enjoy that. I would have Elijah in my team if he wasn't my son anyway, because I think he's good enough and he would add something to the team anyway. But before this season started, we kind of wrestled with should he join my team, because obviously we're a new team and I wanted him to play for me. But we'd had kind of run-ins when we were doing the little league stuff over the last sort of year or two.
So those I want to know more about.
Yeah, so I mean, just the little league, it was very much, it was difficult because he played up quite a bit because obviously his dad's the coach, and I don't know, I'm sure every other coach who's been in this situation has probably been through the same thing, but just the lack of respect, goofing around, going off, doing his own thing, booting footballs around when he should be listening. And of course, my approach to it was to sort of lose my temper with him and, threaten this, threaten that. And it doesn't work. But you kind of get a bit, I used to get embarrassed because there's obviously all the parents are hanging around and all the kids are there, and you feel really self-conscious when it's going on. And if Deb was there, I'd be going, Deb, sort him out. And it's crazy. It's a crazy situation. And so that used to happen a lot. So, and it's nothing more than that, really, just him messing around, going off thinking or complaining about, I don't want to do this, do that. And at the same time, during the games, I would be harder on him than everybody else. And it's the same old thing. Everybody says it. Why are you harder on your own kids? And it's it's a question that I don't know if anybody's got the answer to that. I don't know. For me, I think because, particularly in Little League, because there was a frustration that we had kids who probably didn't want to be there and kids who couldn't really play football well. So you expect more of your own kids if they're sort of half decent, which was my case. So of course, if he did something in a game that I thought he could do better, I'd be, "Oh, Elijah, what are you doing?" Which is a completely wrong thing to do. And of course, he'd get upset on the pitch, or he'd throw his arms around, or give me an aggressive gesture or whatever. So that used to go on, and by my own admission, I've learnt a lot from that, and I didn't probably handle him the way I should handle him. So we had a big sit down before this season, and he actually had interest from another team that he plays for on a Saturday. They've got a Sunday team, and we had to decide. I think Deb was leaning towards him going to that team on a Sunday. And in the end, it was kind of like, well, we can't do it because Evie plays for Wimbledon. I'll be coaching Carshalton, and Elijah will be playing for Epsom. Can't be, three doesn't go into two.
Yeah.
So we had a big sit down, and it was kind of like, right, we kind of made a deal that I would endeavour to treat him exactly the same as everybody else, not be hard on him, and all that goes with that. And he would agree to treat me as he would the other coaches that he has. Because he's as good as gold for them. He doesn't play up. He listens. Strangely enough. So
a teenager before his time.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, we literally had a sit down. It was like, right, I've got to do my bit. You've got to do your bit. And do we agree? And it's kind of like, yeah, okay, we do. And we've had a few instances this season. Generally, it's been a lot better. And I think I have made a real conscious decision to treat him the same as everybody else, and that's whether I give him praise or if I say to him, you could have done that better. And I do that to all of the kids, not just him. Of course, he still takes it a bit personally, and occasionally I find myself being a little bit more, oh, come on, Elijah, which I may not say to somebody else, and I'm still trying to learn from that and not do it as much because he doesn't really react to it. And it's the whole thing. I could praise him 99 times out of 100, but he'll remember the one time that I've said, you could have done that better.
Yeah.
I always try and give him that extra praise and, focus on the good stuff as well. So, I mean, that's my experience of it and, go into it more. But I remember you telling me when Maddie stormed off once, and, lost her temper. So it's all the same. So how's it been for you, especially as it's a girl? because just very quick, because Evie used to play for me as well for 2 years, and I never had any trouble with her coaching her, which is bizarre. But so yeah, I don't know.
So I don't think I've probably had as much trouble as if I was coaching my lad. Then I think I would have more trouble with it. But it's not been too bad. I mean, one of the very first sessions, I think again, I think at that age they're just looking to test the boundaries, aren't they? And because Dad's running the session, you can probably get away with a little bit more. And so, Maddie wasn't the only one this was early on in a session. She wasn't the only one messing about at all. But it's time to clap your hands, speak with an authoritative voice. Right, come on, get into a line. And then I think we were going to go off and do some dribbling or something. And I think someone had kicked a ball away or something like that. And then as I turned around, I just saw Maddie just boot the ball away. And so I just said, right, go on, after that ball. And then she said, no, well, someone else did something. Someone else kicked the ball away before I did. I said, don't care. That's your ball. Go and get it. And so I didn't lose control at any point at all. I just had that you're in a big field, so I was projecting my voice, but without shouting. Yeah. And she just absolutely burst into tears. And real heartfelt sobbing. And I've got all of the parents on the outside looking on. And I'm thinking, oh, come on, Maddie, just pull it together. All I asked you to do was get the ball, Yeah. And because, all the parents are further away, I guess they don't know that, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what they're thinking, Yeah. And it still makes me chuckle a bit now. But yeah, so she got over with that. And there's been a few little challenges of authority. But what I'm not trying to be smart or smug or anything, but for a few years now, I've been really interested in just cognitive bias. So, our brains are wired to do certain things. And, that comes from, millions of years of evolution and there's that primitive part of your brain that, wants to eat when you're hungry and stuff like that, So I think the way you handle your own clan, if you like, is fundamentally different. So from day one, I've really tried to acknowledge that and acknowledge that I am biased, and anyone who says that they're not is kidding themselves or trying to kid everyone else. You are fundamentally biased to your own.
Yep.
Full stop. So as long as you know that, then you can tackle it. So I try really hard. I try, to not be hard, and I try not to favour, and I just try and look across, the different attributes of all the players and just focus on that. So I haven't nailed it, but like I say, it's a constant. Each week, each before training, before a match, there might be just a little challenge to authority. And, one of the things that I haven't quite figured out yet is, just being called dad, in that coaching environment. Yeah. And I think, well, I'd sooner it wasn't, especially when it's like, dad, that singy kind of way of phrasing it. But, I'm not going to call that out explicitly as something, that she needs to stop doing. But it's just one of those things that jars a little bit, and you think, I wonder if, on the training pitch, should I say, call me coach or something like that, and maybe that will just, again, simple little thing like that might switch that brain to just say, right, this is different, While we're on the coaching field or we're in a match, it is a different relationship at this moment in time.
Interesting. I think, I've never thought about that. Well, I have thought about it, but I think because of the age and because everyone calls me Ben or whatever, I don't expect him to call me Ben. That would be a bit weird. So I think maybe as he gets older, if I do end up coaching him as we go older, it'll probably change, and maybe that coach name would put a little bit of a boundary there. But I think it's always going to be a difficult one, especially when they're young. Maybe it'll change as they get older, but I don't know. I talk to Deb a lot about it because she always says to me, which I hadn't thought about before. She said, obviously with work commitments and everything else that goes on, you only get a limited amount of time with your kids anyway, and after school clubs and this, that, and the others. And she said, what you've got to think about is that he doesn't get to see you as much as he probably would like because of all different things that go on in your life, but you only spend a limited amount of time. So she says, and when he does see you on a Thursday, he has to share you with 9 other kids. And she says, do you arrive at training and go straight into it, or do you go and have a little word with him, ask him how his day was, blah, blah, blah? And I said, of course, I probably don't because I haven't got time. So I do try and do that now, just so, how you doing? How was your day? Just to remind him that I am his dad, but we are going into a coaching session, just so he doesn't see me turn up and just sort of blank him. But then also the contradiction is you kind of have to treat him the same as everybody else because you're there to coach them, and it's a team thing. And so I do have a little quick word with him now, and then we go into right. Let's just get into the session. And things have got a lot better. I mean, this week it wasn't so much him challenging my authority as messing around with this other kid, which was really the problem. And then that escalated to him then losing his focus a bit. So I'll put it down. I'm not putting it down to him regressing back to how bad things used to be. I know that they're worse. It was more, he got into this little thing with this kid, and they're friends, but they were just doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing during a session. So, it's interesting to think about the sort of psychological, without going too deep into it, just the effect, trying to put myself in his shoes a bit more, thinking, it must be difficult, if you're not seeing your dad and doing stuff with him that much, and then all of a sudden he comes along and he's got 9 other kids that he's got to keep an eye on. So it must be difficult. But we've had a few post-mortems this season in the early days when things weren't great, and we've managed to kind of improve things. So and I still need to improve things and not harsh, but just take that little extra tone out of my voice sometimes if he does something, because he's a good player and I know how good he can be and how good he is. It's just that whole thing, isn't it? Your expectations get higher, and you get a bit more disappointed when you see him do something that he shouldn't be doing, and he's normally better than that. And that's when you just got to go, well, he's a 10-year-old kid. He's going to do stuff in the heat of the moment on a pitch, which isn't the right decision because they all do it.
So and again, just if he was a good player on the team, not your son, then you would probably be disappointed. If he does something, or he puts in a performance well below what he can achieve. But with being your own, as a parent, you fundamentally want your kids to be the absolute best that they can be. So it's taking that normal coach reaction, and then it just magnifies it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I said to him, we were driving home last night from his Crystal Palace training, and because he's new, he's finding it not difficult, but he's not his normal, 100-mile-an-hour self. Not as cocky because he's getting to know them. He's only been a few times, and there's that whole thing where people pass to their mates
Yeah.
more than other players, and there was a little bit of that last night. But he's really determined to stick at it. And I said, look, I'm really proud of you. I said, you're there because you've been asked to be there. Don't ever think you're not good enough to be there, because what I saw, you're in good company. So I said, take confidence from that and don't worry about it. I said, if you are going to progress anywhere in football, if you ever join any new team, it's going to be like this, because you're the new kid. But I said, and I really sort of and I thought it was important that I emphasised all the positive aspects to him.
Yeah,
I mean, I couldn't resist saying there was a couple of times you didn't pass it quickly enough. But
so
that's just a little. But then I said, but generally I was really impressed. I said you played really well, and you look like you deserve to be there, which is what you've got to think about. So yeah, it's always, I do try, and I probably didn't do it enough in the past, to emphasise those positive aspects and say, look, you've done really well. Hey, Elijah, well done, brilliant. Really pleased, that sort of thing. And I think it does subconsciously get in there. So hopefully, yeah, he's.
I saw an American keynote speaker.
Yep.
He was talking about it was some kind of management or leadership type thing, and he referred to something called a butt sandwich, and so,
right.
so that kind of catches your ear, doesn't it? It's like, what the hell? Where's he going with this? And so he said the problem is, you're trying to deliver praise, and then you insert a but in there.
Yep.
And then you give them something negative to think about. And what he was saying was, everything you said up until that but just washes away. So forget you've even said it. So all the praise, you might as well not have bothered. Because everyone only remembers the but and then the negative stuff. So I think that is, I constantly remind myself about that, because it's a lot easier for me, to just talk that through with you now than to really put it into practice. And that is one of the things I think my daughter doesn't totally appreciate, is that she gets to drive home with the coach, who'll talk her through all the areas where which could be improved. And again, I do try and emphasise the positive. I really liked it when you did such and such a thing. But I think, I'm constantly striving for that right balance between constructive criticism of where the improvements could be, and praise for things that did go well as well.
And that's what I said to you before about the 99 positive comments and the one bad one. And I suppose everybody's like that in any walk of life. You always think about the negative press review, or the one thing at work you got told you could do better despite getting a great review, or most people always focus on that one thing and it eats away at you. And like that butt sandwich is a really interesting analogy, and that's why I try and flip it. So I'll do the negative, constructive criticism first, then but this was great, and hopefully they'll think about the thing you said last, which is a positive comment. So it's the same in a game. No matter how frustrated I get during a game, not just with him, but with any of the kids, I always then try and do hey, you're doing really well, it's great, keep it going. After say, look, you could have done that better. And that's really important, I think. And because you see some coaches just, calling the kids out, and you're like, well, where's the positive? That's praise,
I think the flip side is also true, though, isn't it? I think constant praise, when it's not truly earned, kids can see through that.
Yeah, of course they can. Of course they can. It's like you said, it's getting the balance right, and it's something that you learn as you go on. It's I don't think you're ever going to have it cracked managing your own kids, especially when they are kids. As they get older, maybe it may get easier. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
one of the things you were talking about there was interesting, and we've talked about some of the challenges there. But what Deb was saying about from Elijah's perspective, he doesn't get to see you that much. One of the things I constantly tell myself is, actually this is a real privilege, at this age, that you get to spend so much time, in a leisure type capacity, which, if you weren't doing that, if you weren't coaching your own kids, they might be out playing with their friends or playing on their tablet or whatever. So it is good quality time that you're getting spend with your kids as well. So I thought I'd throw that in there as a positive, because there are positives.
Well, there are.
Obviously, we're talking about the challenges, but that for me is a great thing.
Absolutely, and that's what I said at the start, at the top of the recording. It is nice having your own child in your team, and I would always want to have that.
Yeah.
And who knows, if he wasn't, maybe I wouldn't have got into it this season. I don't know. It's hard to say. I always wanted to do it, but it is a bonus having him involved. And yeah, you're right. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that. Obviously, the responsibility of coaching and the stress, and on a match day, you probably don't appreciate that you're sharing that, especially if you won a game or you've had a good session. You're sharing it with one of your own kids. I suppose you don't. That often washes over me a little bit, and I don't think of that. But then I enjoy that, driving home with him and having a chat about the game. And, we do have that bond over football, which is brilliant. So that's interesting the way you put that. Actually, I hadn't really thought of that.
And it sounds like you're doing the old plan, do, review. Not just on the coaching drills and whatever, but just on that relationship as well, and just keeping it in check and identifying things that aren't going well, and let's stop doing those. And
I'm sure you do it. I think you subconsciously do it, of course. And when we've had those difficult weeks, we've all sat down at home around the table and discussed, well, do you think you behaved at your maximum today? No. Okay. What about your dad? Did he do everything he could have done? And on most of the occasions, he has actually turned around and said, yeah, he has treated me fairly, and I have played up. And occasionally I said, yeah, I probably should have been a bit easier and not said that. So it's you're always reviewing that relationship and trying to iron out the little things that make it difficult. But ultimately, like you said, it is massively rewarding. It really is. And I deal with the people, and they love having their own kids in the team. It's a nice, great thing to have.
Yeah.
As difficult as it can be, of course, you have all those positive moments. And there's nothing better than you seeing him do well on a football pitch, and you get a massive warm glow from watching that, and it's fantastic. So yeah, I would say to anybody thinking about it, it's an amazing experience, and you'll learn as you go on. You'll never have all the answers, but you've just got to keep working at that relationship. And I think it's interesting that the girls seem to be a bit more placid in that. What about if Ruth was coaching? Do you think that would that be fraught with danger in terms of that relationship? If it was flipped, if it wasn't you, well, I don't know.
Good question.
Thought about it.
No, I hadn't, to be honest. I mean, I think it's fundamentally different. Fundamentally different. The opposites are different.
Yeah.
Fundamentally the same. You've got parents, and you've got parental expectations, and you've got kids who want to be kids. And so, just part of it, you're going to hit wrinkles, you're going to hit conflict as you're going through it. So I think it's just, I think it is, for me, about embracing the fact that you do have these inbuilt biases. Do what you're doing, and what I've tried to do as well, which is to just constantly assess yourself, and include your own child in that, and just try and get better. when things haven't gone well, we'll talk about them. Okay, well, how do we do that better?
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, at our Christmas party, I was speaking to some of the parents, and one of the mums was saying after every game, one of the lads in my team, he gets a massive debrief from his dad in the car on the way home, and it's all the stuff that he hasn't done well enough. And I sort of chuckled to myself, and I thought, it doesn't matter if you're a coach, a parent,
everyone's a coach.
Yeah, but she said, as soon as he gets in the car, he's kind of on his case about, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. Why don't you do this? Why don't you tell Ben this? Why don't you take the free kicks? Why aren't you taking the corners? And I kind of had it did make me chuckle, because I just thought that's probably me in the past, and I'm trying, and I think it's just that whole parent thing, isn't it? Parents just kind of have such high expectations for their kids.
Yeah.
And I've seen, in the last few years, when I've been coaching, I've seen a parent in particular is quite aggressive with how he speaks to his child when he's playing.
Right.
And I've seen that child just pretty much shut down on the pitch. Mm-hmm. And I actually saw him walk off giving his dad the finger once, and he walked off crying. I couldn't believe it, and it's a real shock to me, that. And I thought it made me look at and think about that one incident. Made me think a lot about how I speak to Elijah or Evie or whoever on the pitch, and I would never sort of cross that line. And it wasn't great to see, and I think that's when it becomes completely counterproductive.
Yeah. No, it's not good.
Yeah. So it was interesting, but it just goes to show, doesn't it? Every parent's the same. I think it's always that butt sandwich that you keep coming back to.
Yeah, and
you haven't done that.
Like I say, that cognitive bias, and the trouble is when you're not aware of it, and your emotions just rule you.
Yes, that's great point. And I think in this instance, you could see that there was no thought process behind the comments. It was just naturally aggressive, probably over expectation in terms of how good he thinks his child is, and possibly isn't. And he gets that frustration when he's not doing what he expects him to do, because he maybe hasn't got the skill level yet. But it's that's the kind of flip side and the sort of darker side of it, I think. Well, if you're not aware you're doing it, and it's just a natural way of speaking that you've got during a game, because you get so caught up in it, becomes just counterproductive. Absolutely.
So as a coincidence, and it's just popped into my mind just now. So this morning I was showing my lad and my daughter Competitive Dad from the Fast Show. Do you remember that?
I do.
I mean, we didn't go through all of them. Obviously, there's loads, but I found one which was my favourite one, which I remembered from the time, where he takes his two little lads out. It must be on the order of 10, 11 or something like that. And he gets a 5-yard, couple of stumps, so he's got the cricket bat and everything, and little tennis ball to play with, and the kid goes to bowl overarm. He says, no, underarm. It'll be easier for your underarm. And so he absolutely slogs it. And of course he can almost reach both ends of the wickets. It's just like 1, 2, 3. And the thing is, with the Fast Show, a lot of the things were a slow burn, weren't they? So you had to watch it week after week. But for that one, I mean, my lad thought it was the funniest thing he'd seen on TV.
Brilliant.
And it just popped into my mind then when you were talking about just communicating without thinking. Yeah.
Well, Elijah and I played Subbuteo this afternoon.
Oh, right. Who won?
Me 3-0. And every time I scored a goal, he threw all his figures across the room at me. So there you go. It's the same everywhere. Competitive dads, you just can't help it.
Well, that's the thing with these, certainly the fast shows. So, it just takes a normal part of life and just exaggerates it a tiny bit, but not really that much.
I said to him before we played, I said, if I start beating you, no tantrums and no throwing stuff. And no, I won't do that. Of course, as soon as the first goal went and he threw the ball around, all the players are launched through the air. I was just like, forget it.
And of course, you couldn't let him score a goal, so it's, it'd be unearned then.
I was determined to keep the clean sheet, mate.
Oh dear, we'll have to do one of your Sabutio matches with Elijah. Stick it up on YouTube just so I can have a good laugh at that.
Video it, yeah, absolutely.
So one of the other sort of pitfalls I've heard people sort of fall into is having a bias towards their own child or their own kid. So
yeah.
Have you ever felt that? Because again, it's one of those things. So going into it, I was very, very conscious about it. And if anything, I was wondering, it's almost like a pendulum. You wonder, do you swing the other way where, you maybe not putting them in the team when they should be?
Yeah.
Have you ever sort of had those thoughts when or done something and then you look back at it and you think, oh, actually, I did favour them?
It's weird, with the whole being hard on them.
Mm-hmm.
I think I used to do that to
compensate.
And it's almost like I had to show the other parents that I'm not going to treat him favourably because he's my child.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a bit harder on him to prove that, which is completely warped way of viewing it. I think it's not the right way at all to go about it. But that in my subconscious, I think I was a bit harder on him because I thought I'm going to clamp down on him so harshly because just to show he may be my child, but he's going to get no preferential treatment.
Mm.
And instead of just treating him the same as everybody else, I was probably a bit harder on him to sort of, as if I was proving a point to myself that the parents were seeing that I was treating him, it was differently. It wasn't the same as everybody else because I was being harder on him, which is wrong. But it was my way of thinking, I'm so conscious that they're going to think I'm being biased to him, So I'll go the other way and be,
just to tackle that possible perception that you do have a bias towards your own
absolutely,
own son.
especially as this season, because we were a new team and I didn't know the parents. I knew a few of them already, but some of them I didn't know at all. So it was kind of that whole worrying about what people think of you and how they perceive you, and just thinking, I've got to show them that although he's my son, I mean business. So this is how you're going to see me treat him. So you don't think, he's favouring his son, whatever, which is it's crazy looking back on it. But
I think a lot of people probably have those same.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was at the course I didn't get a chance to ask any of the parents because a lot of the parents on my level 1 course coach their kids, and I probably should have asked. I didn't really know them well enough, or we were too busy for me to ask them. But I did think about. As we go on through the weeks, I'll probably ask, how do you find it coaching your son or daughter? But during do I show bias? I sometimes think I am because I may in a game I may leave him on longer than some other kids, possibly because he adds so much to the team, and if it's a close game, I think I don't really want to take him off. But I also do that with other players in the team. So from that perspective, I don't think I do show bias because he's my son. I probably leave the better players on maybe a bit more than some other players. Although I do try and rotate it and keep it. I always do a plan before a game of who's coming on and off, so they all get equal, or for the most part they get equal game time. So I think that's important. I think that's the only way to do it. But obviously if there's a close game towards the end, I may leave him on longer, but that's not because he's my son, it's because he's one of the better players. And there's 2 or 3 others that I will leave on more than others, and I don't take off as much, possibly. If the game's tight, there's a few players that I will try not to take off.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I rotate them. But I don't think I do show him bias in that respect. It's just more that he's a good player, and I would rather have him on the pitch than not on the pitch. But it's the same for the other players that are key in that position.
Yeah.
That I feel I'd rather have them on the pitch. So yeah, I think I can probably hold my hands up and say that I'm not biased towards him as a player. And if I'd like to think if he wasn't good enough, I wouldn't push the issue and get him to play.
Mm-hmm.
I would, because you do see other teams with their son playing or daughter, and you can kind of think, well, maybe they're only in the team because it's his son or his daughter.
Yeah, so that's why I was asking, really, because it's one of those that, you know, from me being a kid, you know, and throughout being exposed to the various teams, it's a really easy thing for anyone to throw out there, isn't it? You know, especially if, you know, you mentioned the dad and lad who, you know, didn't see eye to eye, resulting in the bird. And, you know, I guess at that time their frustration is aimed at each other. But then that could quite easily be directed at the coach, you know, and, oh, well, you know, my lad's not getting enough game time because, you know, you're just picking your son or something like that.
Yep.
So it is. So in that, you know, being a little bit hard on Elijah, you're doing that to tackle that potential threat of perception from the parents, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. That's always been behind my thinking of it.
Yeah.
I don't do that now, but yeah, and it was to prove myself at the start. I was probably a bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely don't show him any bias in terms. I do treat him the same as every other player, and if he's not playing well or whatever, he's having a stinker, he'll come off. Same as any of the others. But what about
if he comes off? Does he throw his Sabutio stuff at you?
He does. You know what? That's you joke, but he does do that.
Right.
That's another thing we've had issues with. That when he does come off, I get a lot of arm waving and stomping off and a bit of dissent, and I really don't like it at all. And I don't tend to say anything when he comes off, but yeah, he does get properly spoken to on the way home or when we get home about doing that.
Right. And does he watch much football on TV?
Yeah, loads. Yeah, he's always watching football. Always.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I think he just does that because I'm his dad, and because he just wants to play all the time. He's just probably like any Premier League footballer. When you bring him off and they throw a bit of a wobbler.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one who does it. He's the only one who does do that. And of course, when his Saturday coach brings him off, good as gold, no problem. He did it a couple of weeks ago. I took him off. We were 4-0 up, and there was like 5 minutes left, and I took him off, and he started doing all the histrionics and stormed off. And I wasn't very happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one thing that I really, because it's a team game, I think it looks really bad to the rest of the team when somebody's doing that.
Yeah.
Pretty disrespectful. But I was going to say, what in terms of, it's not necessarily about ability, but what's Maddie like in terms of how she fits in with the rest of the team? And same question back to you, I guess, with the bias, but I guess you pick her because she's good enough and she wants to play and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I say, I mean, I'm constantly challenging whether I am being biased one way or the other, like positively or negatively. And I think I'm in a slightly more advantageous position than yourself because although you've got your assistant, haven't you? So all things like team selections and what have you, substitutions. You know, I'm talking constantly with the coach about what we should do. Now, if anything, I think my tendency is to possibly be negatively biased, and by that I mean, you know, if Maddie's been rotated off, and you know, like I say, it's a tight game, and you need something to happen, you know, I'll discuss with the coach, and probably my default would be to suggest a player to come on who isn't Maddie.
Yep.
And that's again, I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I think I've nailed it, but I just have that internal monologue first and try and just separate everything, focus on the game, focus on what it is we need. As you said, rotating people on and off. So how much time have people had on the pitch? You're never going to get it perfect, but make sure everyone's getting a fair crack of the whip. So, yeah, I think possibly I'm occasionally negatively biased, but I'm trying to constantly assess that and try and tackle that and not be negatively biased. I'm trying to hit that middle sweet spot where I can just look at things like Mr. Spock,
Yeah.
Or is it Mr. Spock or Dr. Spock? I don't know. Spock. And just analyse it on logic and just separate all the other emotions out of it.
Yeah, no, that's probably the best way, I think.
So, I think, shall we wrap it there on our main section and we'll run into our retro review?
Underground, overground, wumbling free. The wumbles of Wimbledon, common are we.
Right, so Ben, we're going to be talking about the Crazy Gang days of Wimbledon, and I've got a feeling this will be a little bit of us walking up that line and trying to detach emotionally from a few things there, being Liverpool fans, obviously. But I'll hand it over to you. So, what's your first experience of Wimbledon and that Crazy Gang time?
Probably. Well, they're the only team ever in the history of my football experience that have made me cry. And you could probably guess which game that was.
Not even 1990? That made me cry.
I think I was so dumbstruck by that 1991. I didn't know what happened. But the only time I've ever cried after a football match was that Wimbledon game. And I've never cried at a football match since. It's really bizarre. But I was so distraught by it. And for the uninitiated, this is when Liverpool played Wimbledon in the '88 Cup final. And to put it in some sort of context, I would say, you could probably disagree with me here, or you might have your own comparison, but it was probably the equivalent of, say, Man City now playing... I don't know. I'd probably say somebody near the top end of the Championship. Maybe I'm doing a disservice, but they were such overwhelming underdogs that day that you almost can't put it into words. I remember the whole build up to that game and almost thinking, it's in the bag. Which, obviously, you know me now. I'm not like that at all. But
it's because of experiences like that day. You're not like that at all.
Exactly. and you say that, and that's probably my first ever experience of the underdog and the harsh reality of being on the wrong end of that result, because they were obviously in the same division, but they were massive underdogs on that day because Liverpool at that time were all conquering, had won the league title already, and that's just a wonderful, superb, exciting team to watch. And this is a bunch of guys who fought their way up from non-league football and come through the league pyramid bit by bit.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a good example today, because even in the Championship, I mean, look at Wolves now, how much money they've got and spent.
This is why I said, exactly. This is why I said the upper echelons, because I was thinking of Wolves and I thought, well, Wolves have probably got a slightly unfair disadvantage, so because they've obviously got a lot of money. But it's hard. Yeah, you probably can't compare it now, because I don't think, and we'll come into it in a bit, what they did back then, coming from non-league football to what is now the Premier League. I don't think it'll ever be repeated in that way. unless
Yeah.
you've got a big benefactor who throws all his money into a non-league team. Doesn't look like, because Wimbledon didn't do it that way. They just did it through sheer hard work and sheer bloody mindedness. I think that's what stood out about them. That mentality of not everyone hates us, but we don't care. But it was similar to that. They just had this such strong, almost working class, grafting way about them that it just sort of carried them up and up and up to the pinnacle. For them was obviously that cup final, and it was just a huge shock that they won that game. But even then, I remember watching the game, and I was probably 12 or something, 11, 12. I remember thinking during the game, we're not going to score here. We're just not going to score a goal. And when we got a penalty, and I remember John Aldridge stepping up to take it. And I remember thinking, I can vividly remember it, thinking, this is the only way we're going to score in this game, because we just couldn't create a chance for love of the money, because they were so combative in midfield, and Steve McMahon used to boss games in those days, and he didn't get a sniff. And of course, when I remember when he missed that penalty, John Aldridge, I thought they're going to win. And I can't even remember if they'd scored by that point or if it was 0-0. I can't remember. But when we missed
I think
that penalty,
it might have been 1-0 at that point. I think it would have equalised.
Yeah, because I think it was first half they scored, didn't they? Laurie Sanchez's header.
Yeah.
But obviously when he missed that, I thought, well, that's the game done. And there was probably still 25 minutes left, possibly. But yeah, it was a real triumph of just sheer hard work over probably one of the most talented teams at that point that I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And your memories are probably exactly the same as mine. Yes.
I think it was a foregone conclusion, wasn't it? I mean, it was just so. It was a good footballing lesson to be taught. Because I remember talking to my dad and I was saying, I can't believe no one's won the double like loads of times. It seems to be easy, this, after doing it in 86. And then,
back then nobody'd really done it, had they? There's only a couple of teams that ever
That's
really
right.
done it. And it was quite a rare thing.
No one gave Wimbledon any chance whatsoever. I guess, like I say, maybe a Millwall now, where say Millwall are. Yeah. Or a Leyton Orient or someone like that, you could say it's a bit like that, but coming from where they came from. And so, like I said, we're doing this because, not to just drown our sorrows and feel sorry for ourselves about a cup final that's so long ago, but, at the time, as a Liverpool fan, I was absolutely distraught. But it's only after you and you get a bit older, and then you learn a bit more about where they came from, and it is just an amazing story. Where coming up from non-league, in a few years, they'd gone from Division 4 right up to Division 1, which was the top division at the time. And like you say, for them, they did pretty well in the league, didn't they? Especially nowadays, they finished top 10 consistently. Yeah,
they never seemed to be in a relegation fight. Never. They were always a bit too good for that. They could always grind out a result or put a few wins together.
Yeah.
And they never ever seemed to get dragged into that sort of relegation scrap.
Yeah.
Again, it's testament to the kind of hard work and the team spirit that they had.
But I think the moment that I remember, and actually I've not gone back for obvious reasons. Don't want to.
Why would you
stick a fork in my eye either? But what I kind of remember, and I am intrigued actually to see how well I do remember it. The penalty miss wasn't the moment where I thought we're just never going to score and we're going to lose here. There was a moment where I think it was John. There was a bit of a goal-mouth scramble, and John Barnes jumped up, and it looked like he was just going to tap it in to an empty net because Besant was on the floor. He'd made a save. Besant was on the floor. Barnes was just reaching up to just tap it in with his left foot. And this hand comes up from the floor from nowhere and just flicks it away from Barnes. And I was like, how did he do that? And, again, I going into it, I had no idea who Dave Besant was. But, after that day, I had a huge amount of respect for him, not just from the penalty save, but he was a really big, commanding goalkeeper. And that go gadget arm sort of manoeuvre was the moment when I thought, oh crikey, we're done for.
Yeah, no, it was probably the same really. I wasn't aware of any of their players. I don't think. I honestly can't think of any of them ever came on my radar. But then back then, probably a lot of players of the teams never would. But yeah, after that, you could never really get away from them. They were kind of always in your face, which kind of is appropriate to how they were as a team, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things at play here, aren't there? Because they were almost military in the way they had that team spirit. They'd come up through the leagues. No one was out. It's not like we were talking about Mahrez the other week. There were no Mahrezes in the side. It was a real brutal sort of environment, and new players coming in were quickly initiated, and this is what it's like, and it just reminded me a little bit of the military, where you first join up and they try and break you down and build you up how they want to build you up. Now, I don't think they intended to, they've sat round a table and said, right, let's do this like the British Army or whatever. But, looking back, it did seem to be that real pack mentality. And if you were on the inside in the clique, you were all right, and, you'd go over the trenches for anyone. But if you were outside, I think it could be a little bit brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also comes from the characters that you had in that team.
Yeah.
And there were characters, Vinnie Jones, John Fashanu, Dennis Wise. They kind of embodied that, not military, but they was, you can imagine them doing the initiation, all of them, because we all know since now what kind of people they are, both on the pitch and off the pitch.
Yeah.
You can just imagine it, and even Bobby Gould kind of, manager when he was the manager at the time, he kind of epitomised that as well.
Yeah.
And he kind of helped foster that whole team spirit. But yeah, there was probably a lot of people in that team who not disappeared, but didn't ever really have a career in football after that. But the team was always greater than the sum of its parts. And that was part of their success. And like I said, I don't think that will ever be repeated. You'll never get a team now who could do that because of the money involved in football. The chasm's too wide, and you will never see that repeated. Cambridge came close a few years later. Cambridge United almost got into the Premier League, and that was a similar thing. They sort of worked their way up, but again, there wasn't the huge swaths of money around like there are now. It was a real one-off, unique thing that I don't think will ever be repeated. Personally, that's just my view.
So I don't know, because I look at Leicester winning the Premier League, and that seemed to be a one-off, that wouldn't happen in 100 more years. But so you never know. And I've seen interviews with ex Wimbledon players saying the same. It'll never be repeated, and I don't think they'd get away with a lot of the things they did internally. But the interesting thing for me, so after that FA Cup final, and like I say, they didn't really struggle in the league at all. They got results, and so they had Plough Lane, didn't they? Which was basically, as they went up the league, they didn't reinvest any of that into the ground at all. So it was still very much a non-league stadium, but they used that to their advantage, didn't they? They knew.
I used to dread Liverpool going there and playing. Not often we'd get a win there. It was a nightmare. Yeah,
and I've seen interviews since. They used to turn the heating off. Just make sure it was really cold. And they just knew that no one liked going there.
Yeah.
And I think the style of football that they had was so direct, unashamedly direct.
Yep.
And they just didn't care what anyone else thought about them. In fact, I think they probably revelled in the infamy of it all. But
Yep.
I think their particular style had quite a lot of impact on other teams around them. So you mentioned about Cambridge. So what was the chap's name?
John Beck.
Beck, that was it. Yeah. But Dave Bassett, who's obviously, he'd helped get Wimbledon up the leagues before Gold took over. So he took over, was it Sheffield United?
Yep.
And so that was very similar direct style.
Yep.
And we've mentioned about Jack Charlton. That was very direct as well.
It almost made it not kind of more acceptable to play that way.
Yeah.
You probably didn't, in the old First Division, whatever now, you probably never had a team like that. Everyone used to play a bit of football, and there was never a team who just came in and, scrapped, fought, played directly, unsettled opponents, used every means of their disposal, throwing sand on the pitch, making the ball greasy so people couldn't throw it, probably whatever it was.
Yeah.
They like you said, they used all those things to their advantage, and why not? But let's also not forget as well, they had some good players. Dennis Wise, whatever you think of Dennis Wise, he had a great career.
Yeah.
Played for England, went on to manage, played for Chelsea for years. Vinnie Jones had a decent career. John Scales, I remember John Scales at Liverpool, loved him. I thought he was so cultured as a defender. I thought he was a brilliant defender, and I wish we'd signed him earlier.
Yeah. I think he probably does as well.
Yeah, they had some good players. It wasn't just, you can only get so far with that brawn and muscling teams out and being aggressive. You've got to have a bit of talent, and they definitely had that. And when you've got John Fashanu up front, he was probably a bit like an Andy Carroll type, wasn't he? Nightmare to mark, all elbows and arms, and
yeah.
Bit of a nightmare for a defender to come up against. And why not use that? If you've got that in your armoury, you're going to use it, and they did. Absolutely.
But I think for me, what's you'll never know. But it seemed to me that they weren't picking up players. That all those names you've just mentioned, who went on to have great careers. Dennis Wise went off to Chelsea. Vinnie Jones went at Chelsea, didn't he? Via Leeds, I think.
Yep.
Besant ended up at Chelsea. Terry Phelan went to Manchester City. No one was clambering after these players before Wimbledon.
No.
And then after, I think Scales, someone like Bristol City. So, you'd have to wonder if they went to another club that didn't have that kind of camaraderie and, that real kind of brutal environment where it's fight or flight.
Yeah.
Would they have had the same careers? And you'll never know. But my gut tells me they probably wouldn't.
Yeah, possibly. You're probably right. It's all about right place, right time to a point, isn't it?
Yeah.
That group of players were just the right group of players for that particular moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's tragic, kind of what's happened since, really, with the way that all ended.
Well, just before let's talk about the sort of messy divorce, I guess. In a bit, but what I just wanted to touch on as well, because I another side, Crystal Palace, had that real direct style, and I think there were a few players, was it Eric Young or someone like that? I'm sure there were some players that went from Wimbledon to Palace, and of course they shared the ground for a while. Well, Wimbledon rented, but I remember watching some sort of tactical coaching videos back in it must have been the early 90s time. And this was, I reckon, Sam Allardyce and people like that probably dined on this sort of idea, but it was basically preaching that football, can be played in a lovely way, but actually when you look at the goals, they're usually scored from 3 passes or less.
Yep.
And, it sticks out in my mind, and this is a long time ago now, it's nearly 30 years ago, but I still remember that. And I think it's through the success of teams like Wimbledon, like Palace, because they obviously went to the FA Cup final as well, didn't they? Yeah. People were looking at those and saying, oh, well, football's evolving for this really direct style, and there doesn't seem to be any room for this fancy football sort of stuff. So for me, English football, and as well, English teams weren't playing in Europe at that time, were they? So, it was usually English teams against English teams, and I felt at the time, through those early 90s, that the longer ball, the more direct sides were getting a lot of success, and the traditionally passing teams, were found wanting at times.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Barcelona came along. But no, I think there is a little bit of, I don't want to say of Wimbledon, but Wimbledon's influence in the English teams, like all through the divisions. Because I look at the game now and I do think it is more direct than when I first started watching football. There's an appreciation that, the long pass, the direct pass is absolutely a part of the game. Whereas I think when I started getting into it, and that 88 side of Liverpool is probably one of the most exciting I've seen. But there was this idea, I think, or a perception more than an idea, that short passing was the only thing they did.
Yeah.
And they didn't. But, again, it's just that perception.
Well, yeah, especially playing on the counter-attack now is kind of in vogue, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the long pass is a key part of that. It's a key weapon. You break on from the edge of your own box, bang, long ball, you're away.
Yeah.
And it's a skilled pass. It's not just a lump to a 6'5" striker hoping he'll knock something down with somebody else. It's a accurate breakout pass that's going to lead to a breakaway chance on goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and I don't know if I don't know how many long passes they played when people are shouting, "Get it in the mixer." was the old shout, wasn't it? Just get it in there, make them sweat, get them facing their own goal, challenge the goalkeeper. It's brilliantly simple stuff, and like I say, unashamed about it. So, I think unfortunately though, we've talked about some really good players there, and I agree on Scales. I thought he was really good, solid centre back there. But unfortunately, to balance the books, they've sold off, or they had sold off, a lot of these very good players who went on to have great careers. Vinnie Jones, of course, future captain of Wales there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was kind of random, but
very random. But I guess being a Jones, it probably shouldn't have been that unexpected. But
yeah, so there's some link there somewhere along the way.
I'm not sure if anyone actually tracked down. I think he was saying it was a grandparent, wasn't he? But
I believe so.
But yeah, so they sold off these good players, and I guess it's not just, like I say, it's not just about the replacement players not maybe quite being up to the standard, but that camaraderie, that togetherness probably dissolved a bit, didn't it? Which didn't help them.
Yeah. And like I said, sort of right players, right time. You can do a character reference when you're signing a player to a point, but I don't know, if you've all come through the ranks together and you've all gone up through the divisions together, it's hard to, because you normally handpick players for their their skill levels and their ability, but with Wimbledon, it was almost like they had to have that personality and character almost first, and then you thought about the football ability. That kind of makes sense. It's it's a really unique thing, and to try and replace that is difficult. So
yeah, and it was only after, and you look back and understand a bit more about what was going on. I had no idea at the time about the whole infamous picture of Vinnie Jones grabbing Gascoigne.
yeah,
And years later, I saw an interview with Gazza, and basically Vinny had come up to him at the start of the game and basically said, "I'm marking you, fat boy." And so he followed him everywhere on the pitch, and Vinnie Jones had a good old long throw on him as well. And at some point in the game, there was call for that, and so he'd basically turned round to Gascoigne and said, "Right, I need to go and take this throw in. You wait here and I'll be back in a minute." and Gascoigne was laughing about it, telling the story. But I can imagine at the time Vinny was pretty deadly serious about it, So anyway, so they lost all that group of players and that core group of personalities. And I guess despite having, pretty good, a decent league position year on year, the crowds never really came. And so with that, they're always trying to balance the books.
Yeah.
And I don't quite remember what happened after that. I remember Sam Haman was the chairman at the time. Do you remember?
Don't remember it that clearly. They just seemed, like you said, they just seemed to sell off all the best players. Didn't really reinvest in the team. There was all the, were they going to stay at Selhurst Park or not? And then, all of a sudden they became MK Dons. It was just kind of.
I guess that was the first nail in the coffin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They moved away from Plough Lane, and so we're using Selhurst Park, so Crystal Palace's ground. And I'm sure I remember there was talk about building a new ground for a few years there, but it just never seemed to happen. And then all of a sudden it seems to be, well, we're going to play in Milton Keynes. And if anyone's not quite that clued up on their geography, to understand how upset the Wimbledon fans would be, I guess just look at a map and you'll see it's not very close at all. It's,
50 miles, 50 miles, probably? Easy.
Now, I think they kept the Wimbledon name initially, I seem to remember.
Yes.
And, I do remember them getting, and probably continue to get, quite a lot of stick because, it happens a lot more in the US. It doesn't happen, frequently, but a lot more frequently than it does here, where a certain franchise is picked up from a particular state and then moved to another state. But over here, I think, I can't separate the club from the location.
It's just a crazy, we've club over. We're going to, it's like just stealing a club.
So I think
effectively,
it's stealing for me. It's stealing a club's position in the league. And I should say, so obviously Ben, but just for the listeners, so I do actually live, so Milton Keynes is my closest top flight club.
Yep.
And so, I do go down there, take the kids down there, probably on average every month or so. And it's just good to watch. Not quite the top flight football, but good standard professional football. Although this season not so much, but it's just good to see the pros at it.
Yeah.
They did effectively, occupy the position of what was formerly Wimbledon FC, who obviously went into administration.
Yep.
But Ben, I guess nowadays you do have certain ties to Wimbledon as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, Evie plays for them, and it's a real. It comes across as a real family club now, and I think that comes from those dedicated, brilliant supporters starting from scratch. And I think you've again, similar to the Crazy Gang story, it's that whole spirit and collective unity that have dragged them back to where they are. And again, it's an incredible. When we say, almost contradicting myself, saying it won't be repeated, it kind of has to a point, because I mean, I can't remember how many divisions below the league they refounded and started again. It was, I think it's something crazy, like 7 divisions below the Football League. It's they were a long way down, and they've had this ridiculous run of promotions. And I think that's partly because they're kind of a big name draw, I suppose. When you're that far down, people remember the name, and people probably want to come and play for you. And they've got that hardcore support, a ready-made support. So it's not like starting a team from scratch and you've got no support. You've got that support, and people want to desperately revive that club. And it's just seen them, I don't know. I know a Wimbledon fan quite well, and he goes to every game. And of course, they're grumbling because they're near the bottom of League One. They don't like this, that, and the other. But they've got to think. I guess you've got to stop and sometimes think how far they've grown in the last 10 years. Beating 7-8 promotions, it's crazy. Very, very short space of time, and that momentum has carried them to where they are. And yeah, I do hope they. I think there's good news now on getting back to Plough Lane. Hopefully,
I'm right. They're going back.
I believe so. Yeah, I think they've kind of got planning permission all sorted. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I think they've finally got agreement on going back to Plough Lane and building a new stadium. So, once they get back in there, they've got their proper own home back. Guys are limit again, and who knows? Maybe they can get back to the promised land. It'd be difficult, but they've got this far, so why not?
Well, I think one thing they'll probably be a little bit happy about is obviously MK Dons are struggling down in the relegation zone at the minute, and Wimbledon are just outside. So there's no love lost there at all. Yeah,
there's definitely a bit of needle there when they play.
Yeah. Well, let's hope they both stay up. It's good to have a good footballing rivalry in the same division. Okay, I think that's it from my side. Anything else, Ben, you want to say on the Crazy Gang?
I don't think so. I think that's me done.
Okay, cool. Let's wrap it up then. You've been listening to the Grassroots Coachcast. If you do like the show, then please go ahead and hit that subscribe button on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast catcher of choice. And while you're there, we really do appreciate those 5-star reviews or a Go Latzo that helps other people find the podcast. You can get in touch with us by email at grassrootscoachcast@gmail.com, or if you want to tweet us at grootscoachcast, we'd love to hear from you.
So thanks for listening, and we will speak to you guys next week.
And Ben, just one more thing. It's been emotional.